Hey, Chapel family. Our passage this week to meditate on as a church and as individuals is Isaiah 53, verse 6. And this is a wonderful passage, and this is a passage that speaks of what we call the suffering servant. It is part of the servant songs found in the second half of the book of Isaiah. The book of Isaiah, part of the storyline there is this calling on the people of Israel, God's people in the Old Covenant, to be the servants of God in truth, to live out what it means to obey the Lord, to honor Him, to serve Him in all their lives. But the reality is, if you've ever read the book of Isaiah, you know that, especially at the opening, it is full of a dark diagnosis of the state of the lives of those who are there in Israel at the time. And what we find, the problem is that the people of Israel themselves are not capable of breaking this cycle of sin that they are stuck with. They are stuck in, and they need someone to break them out of. And that's where the Lord, our Creator, God, steps in to break the cycle of sin. And He does that through the servant, because you cannot just take our sin and cover it over, to put it under the proverbial cosmic rug, but rather He needs to deal with it. He needs to punish sin. He needs to, and what this passage is going to show us, He needs to atone for it, to cover it. And He does that through His suffering servant, which this is a prophetic passage speaking of and pointing us to the future work of Christ. And it is a beautiful passage. Let me just read Isaiah 53, verse 6. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way, and the Lord has laid on Him the iniquity of us all. It is not a very flattering passage, is it? None of us like to be considered sheep. In fact, these days, to be a sheep is definitely something that people do not want to identify with, to be misled by some authority or another. But more than just being able to be misled, another danger is that we do not have any shepherd at all. And here we find we as sheep, all of us, all humanity, like sheep, we have gone astray. And the issue isn't that we're following after some poor under-shepherd who's doing a bad job or being led astray by people, by leaders, and by false information. Rather, the issue at heart is that we have gone astray of our own terms and of our own will. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned every one of us to his own way. And that's our issue. That's our issue, that we have turned every one of us to his own way. And I want you to see what God does here. Knowing that we have rebelled against him, our Creator, who has the authority and the right to command us. And here he is speaking as the one who loves and has cared for his people, given them his law, directed and guided and redeemed them out of Egypt. He is the one that has the right to call them to service. Yet we fail in this. And what God does is found in this third line of this verse. And the Lord has laid on him, this is speaking of that servant who will suffer in our place, Christ Jesus. The Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Here it is speaking of atonement, vicarious atonement. A propitiation, that is, he's satisfying the judgment, the wrath of God on our behalf. And that word iniquity is vastly important for us. It carries three ideas in it. The idea of the misdeed, the wrong action, the guilt or status of guilt that is incurred in it, and then on the third part, the punishment that is deserved for it. So what you have is, quick illustration, if you commit a murder, that is a misdeed, a wrong action, and when you commit it, you get the guilt of being a murderer, that status of murderer, and then you, if our justice system is operating as it should, you will then be sentenced and punished as a murderer. And that word iniquity carries all three of those ideas. And so when we are told that the Lord, our God, has laid on Christ, the Son of God, the iniquity of us all, he has laid on him, he has credited him with our misdeeds. He has credited him with our guilt. And he has punished him in our place. This is a marvelous truth which frees us from our sin, its guilt, its consequences, its status, its punishment. And it frees us to approach God boldly and humbly. It frees us to be so forgiving and loving towards others as God has been toward us. It ought to shape our lives as husbands. It ought to shape our lives as wives, as parents, as children, as employees. This is how God works. This is how God saves. This is at the very heart of what we as Christians believe, and this is at the heart of what we rejoice in. Meditate on this, brothers and sisters.